Hello, and welcome to my problem-solving speech. Today we'll be talking about the benefits of substance abuse treatment programs over prison sentences for people struggling with drug addiction. This is not a new option, and some states have already started taking steps in the right direction. I will be highlighting one of those stories later, but first, let's go over some statistics in America. These were compiled from the National Institute on Drug Abuse, the National Center for Drug Abuse Statistics, and the Department of Justice. In 2018, over 20 million Americans over the age of 12 had a substance abuse disorder. This includes everything from marijuana to methamphetamines, various prescription medications like opioids, which also includes heroin, and club drugs like MDMA, better known as ecstasy. When the war on drugs was started in 1971, it did have a focus on stopping the importation of drugs and treatment for those struggling with addiction. However, a decade later, it evolved into a literal war against the drug addict. Nonviolent drug offenses surged from 50,000 to 400,000 by the mid-90s. And mandatory minimum sentences for things like possession led to mass incarceration, which is the direct cause for overcrowding and poor living conditions for inmates. Currently, an estimated 50% of incarcerated Americans have a substance abuse disorder, and only 10% of them may get the help they need. While many recovering addicts preach that prison helps save them, the sad truth is that most prisons are simply not equipped to function as a drug rehabilitation program. They may offer some form of talk therapy, but due to a lack of funding, they're rarely up to par with an actual rehab facility. The lack of funding typically stems from stigmas around drug abuse and substance users. If the inmate does not advocate for inclusion in a recovery program, they will not just be considered for it, and a lot of them don't even know they exist. Also, drugs can easily be smuggled into prisons by way of mail, visitors, and sometimes prison personnel. Drug addiction and mental health often go hand in hand, and the lack of proper psychological treatment will only lead to a worsened problem for the struggling inmate. There are just not enough mental health professionals to service every American prison, and the criminal justice system is more focused on punishing the addict rather than rehabilitating them. A nonviolent drug offender will often get caught up in a cycle of addiction, relapse, and reoffending. Once the person is released, they have a higher chance of reoffending if they did not participate in a treatment program. And the truth is, very few prisons have effective treatment programs. A lot of prisons have substandard healthcare to begin with, so the detoxing inmate will likely receive substandard care during this most difficult process of their recovery. Some states have programs in place for the inmate once they complete their prison sentence. These typically include classes and drug testing, but if they violate any of the rules of the aftercare program, they just go right back to prison. The Stanford Prison Experiment of 1973 found that a prison environment can worsen mental health in even the healthiest of brains. And the person now has this charge on their criminal background that will follow them for the rest of their lives and make it much more difficult to be successful in their recovery as well as life in general. It would just make more sense for them to skip prison altogether. Inpatient rehab is often expensive, and the quality of care will be dictated by that price. It's true that private facilities usually have more to offer than a state-funded one, but state-funded programs would greatly improve with more funding. If the cost of housing the nonviolent drug offender in prison was redirected into the state-funded rehab facility, so many doors would open for the facility as well as the person being treated. Another option is outpatient community-based treatment programs. These have also been around for decades, and a recent study by Research Triangle International and Temple University found that community-based treatment programs reduce crime rates and save the criminal justice system billions of dollars. Community-based treatment programs give the addict in recovery not only therapy and skills to manage their recovery process, they also help them in other areas of recovery, such as finding jobs, furthering their education, and even finding better housing if they're in need. Last month, the state of Oregon passed a new bill to decriminalize the possession of all Schedule 1 through 4 drugs. Now, that sounds radical, but please listen before you pass any harsh judgment. Instead of jail time, the person in possession of drugs will receive a fine or the option of completing a treatment program. To cover the costs, the bill also established the Drug Treatment and Recovery Service Program, which creates grants for state-funded and community-based treatment programs. A spokesperson for the Whitebird Clinic said that Measure 110 does not legalize drugs, it simply puts us on a more humane path where people get access to treatment instead of criminal punishments. And I think that's what they deserve. No one deserves to be labeled a criminal because they are struggling with substance abuse disorder or mental health conditions. After decades of the war on drugs, criminalizing drug addiction, now is the time to ensure that the addict gets treatment and not punishment. Drug addiction affects every person differently, and the tough love of a prison sentence is not going to be effective for every addict. Not only will rehab over prison sentences greatly reduce mass incarceration and prison overcrowding, sending the nonviolent drug offenders to rehab or getting them started in a community-based treatment program will help them address the underlying issue that caused their addiction, improve their mental health, self-esteem, and overall quality of life. Thank you.